Nobody doubts that we are better off, more relevant, more important, more prominent, more acceptable in the world today than we were 10, 20 years ago. People may talk sort of grand strategy, geopolitics, etc. I regard looking after Indians. Sometimes sort of get up in the morning and say, okay, that's me, and there's a sort of a sense of responsibility and
Hello and welcome to Connected to India. You're watching Spotlight and I'm Poonam Sharma. On Spotlight today we have a very special guest, India's External Affairs Minister, Mr. S. Jaishankar, who's visiting Singapore for the India Business Summit organized by the Indian High Commission here in Singapore. Welcome to Connected to India, sir. It's a pleasure to have you with us. And welcome back to Singapore. It's clearly a very special place for you.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as you know, I was High Commissioner here. But I would say more than that. I mean, there are some places you feel very much at home, and your friends, you've just comfort. And I think that's very much the case with Singapore. So I've been back. I mean, I keep coming back. I find reasons to come back, to be very honest. So it's good to be here.
Indians in Singapore have this, sense of pride with regards to you being the External Affairs Minister. For them, it's like one of their own is a minister now. Have you felt, the reactions that you have received, the sense of warmth that has come your way?
Well, yes, very much so. I mean, obviously, when all of this happened, I mean, it was not something I expected. I think it's not something many other people expected. So I got a lot of messages from all over the world, and a lot of them came from Singapore, trust me. I think it's just when you have a good working relationship, a lot of friends, people with whom you can be very open, it's natural that whether it's sort of good things or challenges, they empathize with you, they identify with you. So it was, it frankly felt good hearing from a lot of them.
You are very much aware about the sizable Indian diaspora that Singapore has. It's also a very active and influential diaspora now, which has strong ties back home, both culturally and financially. Prime Minister Modi has had a great diaspora connect in the last 5 years. How important is this connect and this engagement with the diaspora?
Well, to my mind, as I look at the foreign policy of different countries, actually something even bigger than foreign policy, just an attitude of different countries to their diasporas. I think ours is really a very unique case for a variety of reasons, okay? I mean, first of all, if you look at the time when India's image in the world started changing, it's associated with the spread of the diaspora. That India's image is very much the diaspora's image. That when somebody in some country, I mean when somebody in Singapore, for example, looks at an Indian professional, somebody in the finance world, a doctor, or somebody in the IT world, they transpose that onto their sense of India. For them, India is that Indian they are dealing with. I mean, and it's not just in Singapore. I mean, I've lived in the US over a period of time, and I can see the change as the diaspora grew, as people with different skill sets went out there. What were individual capabilities, in a way, contributed to our collective image. So I think certainly where India is concerned, the Indian government is concerned, we value the diaspora enormously because we think in many ways they are the image of the country in the world. Now, other than that, in the success of the diaspora in different parts of the world actually leads to stronger connections with other societies. That through them, actually your access expands, your relationships expands. Your ability to engage people in different spheres expand. And bear in mind a very interesting difference which sometimes people forget. We are not the only country with a diaspora. Okay, in a globalized world, almost everybody has a diaspora of some size. Smaller countries have smaller diaspora, bigger countries have bigger diaspora. But many countries, the relationship between them and the diaspora is very fraught. because the diaspora is a diaspora sometimes for political reasons, sometimes for reasons where they left their home society under unhappy circumstances. It can happen. A lot of the European migration to the US, for example, was like that. Ours is very different. Ours is very different, that the diaspora maintains their relationship with
the ties back home, yes.
Ties back home. And also because as a society we are still heavily family centric, that is also a pull back home. So this sort of comfort that we have with the diaspora is actually truly unique. I mean, if you look at something like the Pravasi Bharatiya Divas, nobody else does it the way we do it. And I still remember when I was High Commissioner here, should have been 2008 or 9. Yeah,
yes.
But I think this event happened in 9. Mm-hmm. For the first time, we took the PBD out of India, okay, and we did it here. And we did it here, and I remember at that time, Lee Kuan Yew came, Goh Chok Tong came, the PM came. But the most interesting request actually I got was from the Chinese ambassador. Mm-hmm. She asked me saying, can I come in and sit in on it, because I'd like to see how actually this is being organized and what the sentiment is. So I do think somewhere our diaspora relationship is actually quite unique. I think its value is even more strongly recognized by Prime Minister Modi himself and by his government. If you look at a lot of the initiatives we've taken, the events we've done, the recognitions we've given, they reflect this heightened salience, importance of the diaspora.
Moving forward, how do you think your ministry is going to connect with the diaspora, and what are your priorities and concerns related to them?
Well, see, my ministry is deeply connected with the diaspora. And in fact, we had a brief period when we had a separate ministry for overseas Indian affairs. And
yes.
The reason why we merged it with the Ministry of External Affairs, which happened actually at the initiative of my predecessor, Sushma Swaraj. The thinking was that we needed the full weight of India's representation abroad to be available at the service of the diaspora. If you had a separate department for the diaspora, there's somebody who says, oh, that's their problem. Embassies carry on with what embassies do. We didn't want that, We wanted to make diaspora central to the workings of embassies all over the world. And there's a very simple principle behind that, other than, what I told you about image and connection and so on. Look, we are going up in the world, okay? We can debate the pace, you can debate the impact, but you can't debate the direction, okay? Nobody doubts that we are better off, more relevant, more important, more prominent, more acceptable in the world today than we were 10, 20 years ago, and that this will keep going. Nobody doubts that. Now, the proposition is very simple. A country like ours must look after its people. Okay, it must look after its people at home. It must look after its people abroad. You can't say that because somebody left my shores, I don't have responsibility. You look at other major powers. They're very, very particular on this point, looking after the people. Now, here's the difference. When you say looking after the people, you first say, so people means what? People with your passport? People, but in our case, that's too narrow a definition because the relationships are still there. So we have to take a more expansive view that it has to be people of Indian origin. And I regard today, when people may talk sort of grand strategy, geopolitics, etc., I regard looking after Indians, taking care of their interests, as central to the reputation of India, to the prospects of India. So for me, it's a fundamental foreign policy strategic issue. It's not a service issue or,
just maintaining the connect.
Yeah, correct.
And I think, and I speak on behalf of all Indians living outside India, that it has really gone from strength to strength, and commendable job by MEA. Most of the people feel that, who are living outside India, they now feel that, they are important or relevant to India, even if they are not in India. And that's quite an achievement.
In a sense, you could say the challenge has created better capability and performance. Capability and performance has in turn fed our ability. But if you look, for example, today we have, again, we are dealing with a very broad spectrum, okay? There are people of, say, higher income levels and greater skill sets who are able to look after themselves very much better. A lot of our responsibility are for people who are more vulnerable, who are much more dependent on systemic support. So we have created a set of platforms and solutions which would cater for all of this. I mean, a common one, for example, today would be that in the old days, suppose you are traveling abroad and you lost your passport. Exactly. You would have to go through this whole, jhamela of who's my RPO, where do I go? Then RPO has to say, well, Poonam is really Poonam, whatever,
True.
And you're stuck till then. Today, you go into embassy and say, I lost my passport. They have a database, they check it out, and they're able to sort out your problem. So that's the simplest way by which we've changed. Much more, something intermediate would be, we have this platform called Madad, okay, where people who got into difficulties, and a lot of this is very prevalent in the Gulf,
yes,
to some extent in Malaysia, less so, where somebody is stuck, employer is mistreating, wages haven't been paid, somebody is missing. So those sort of issues, and we have today a platform where you can register your concerns. There's the ability to track progress on that platform, and most important, once you enter that and you're kind of captured by the system, there's the responsibility on the part of the system to give you an answer. So that, what I grew up, I saw in my early service years, that people came to us and often didn't get sometimes even a reply.
Yeah.
Now that wouldn't happen today. I mean, in a large number of cases, we would be able to give solution, but I can tell you in every case we'll be able to give a reply. So
and the time in which the reply is coming, that kind of makes a lot of difference.
And we've also I would say kind of an additional edge in a way is really responding to Indians in distress. And there, I think the contribution made by my predecessor was really extraordinary. And she's set a very, very high bar. But what she's done really is she's changed our system. She's changed the mindset. She's changed the mindset of the foreign ministry. She's changed the mindset of the government back home. She's changed the mindset of every embassy, so that, people don't think, oh, it's a big favor, to do something.
Yeah.
Okay. Which I'd be honest, was the prevalent attitude. If somebody had a problem on a Saturday, 10 years ago, they'd be told, come back on a Monday.
Yeah, but now the mission will be more than eager to help them out. Yeah. So moving to India-Singapore relationship, both the countries have always have had very familial relationships. Tell me, the Prime Minister comes here in his first term 3 times, definitely showing the warmth in the relationship. We have the first Pravasi Bharatiya Divas here in Singapore. How would you define the trajectory of this relationship, both from a historical point of view to the current economic?
Well, look, to my mind, Singapore is a country. Singapore, in many ways, is also a symbol. If you go around in India, it's very interesting. You'll see sometimes those hoardings for housing, and they would say Singapore standard construction. So Singapore is actually also a kind of standard today.
Yeah, it's a bar that Singapore has set for everyone to follow.
So now, how has that happened? I think in many ways, you said it has always been the case. I would sort of respectfully dispute that. I think it really started changing in the 90s. It started changing in the 90s, and Singapore was very instrumental in opening us to the world. I would say if there's a single person, it was obviously a collective effort, but if there's a single person who really deserves credit for that reach out. It is Mr. Goh Chok Tong. But there were a lot of other. Everybody today in the Singapore government has made their contribution too. But at that time, somebody had to make that leap of faith.
First move.
Yeah, and that was very much Mr. Goh Chok Tong. In terms of where how that has unfolded, see, it has become a change of mindset, that people came here, they spent time here, they did business here, they took their holidays here, and they went back different. Okay. The second, it has become for us in many ways an operating base. Look at the number of, really we have now companies in the thousands out here who use Singapore actually as a kind of a global platform. So it has a part of the globalization of India is actually using Singapore as a platform. It's also been a very meritocratic, society where Indian talent has been recognized, where Indian talent has been given opportunity, and that's very good for us. And because often people come here, they may move on from here, they may come back to India, they may go on to other countries, but definitely, and I've seen this evolution in the last 10 years. The Singapore which I first came to, I came to Singapore first time maybe in the 1980s, but at that time it was a totally different scene. 2005, 4-5 I started, from 4-5 I've been coming regularly. So I've seen over 15 years this evolution. And to me, this is really the buzz today, someone frankly like all of you, you sitting here interviewing me or somebody who would have been in my position would not have been even imaginable earlier. So Singapore has been helpful there. Singapore also has been very helpful to us, I would say, strategically. That, one, they were they had a big role in creating our connect with the ASEAN. Then there was this big debate a decade ago whether there should be a larger grouping, which was eventually ended up as the East Asian Summit. There were voices at that time who said, well, it should be ASEAN and Northeast Asia, China, Japan, Korea. But Singapore was one of the countries, and among the loudest of the voices, which really said, no, let's bring India in as well. So if you look at India's eastward connect today, a lot of that is a virtue of the relationship with Singapore. So for me, it's not just another relationship. It is really a very, very unique relationship, a very valuable relationship, and one which I think deserves really full appreciation.
So you have been continuously making this point quite strongly, that in the age of convergences, the countries that have a common cause on particular issues are most likely to come together. And in that context, with ASEAN and Indo-Pacific region, do you think that the work that India has done with the Act East policy is going to remain its top focus, main priority?
It would be a big issue. I think you got to recognize we are moving really into a different world. And a lot of the questions that we get, and a lot of sometimes the suspicion or not the suspicion is too strong, but the set attitudes that you encounter, they reflect an earlier world. We are moving into a very loose, unstructured, where it's a kind of all of the above answer. So do you work with, do you work one-to-one? Do you work trilaterally? Do you work collectively? Answer is all.
Yeah.
Do you work with people with whom you have great affinity or people with marginal affinity? Answer is all. So it depends on the issue. It depends on the situation. I think the smart powers would be those who are most open-minded, most flexible, who have that ability to improvise and respond. And I think it's a great Indian personality trait. So when I look at the world, actually, in an interesting way, I say, oh, okay, I can deal with this situation, because somewhere in me there is that confidence. Many variables, great uncertainty, the ability to think through on your feet, and these are qualities which have actually stood the diaspora in very good state. I mean, you look at the diaspora, I mean, they go to a country, barely know what it is, and within a few months, they're up and running. And in a sense, if you transpose that onto the world of politics, that's where I'm going to be.
And I think we've done pretty well when it comes to foreign policy. Some new friendships have been made, some old ones have been strengthened, but some have remained complex, like the one that we have with China.
Yes, that's true, though, mind you, China, in a sense, would be among our oldest relationships. I mean, it will go back a few thousand years. I mean, it's good sometimes to remind people, actually, of the historical and cultural connect in China. I mean, I lived in China for a number of years, and I think it's if you look at China's history, you look at China's culture, there's a very, very strong connection there with India. In fact, the first ambassador, Indian ambassador to China, he wrote a book called In Two Chinas, and he records there that Chairman Mao told him that there was a Chinese peasant saying that if you do good things in this life, you'll be born in India in the next. So it reflected a certain view of India as a country where Buddhism came from, and yes, China is a complicated relationship. I think it has different phases, it has different facets. A lot of it is people pick the bits that they like. But I would say collectively, it's important to have a balanced view, to have a sober view about it, because finally, look, we will be, I mean, we are population-wise the two biggest countries in the world. We would economically soon be the three biggest economies in the world. We are neighbors. And we are still two countries whose future, I mean, you look at the next 20, 30 years, there's a lot that lies ahead of us, so it's very important.
So I have a list of questions that I want to ask you, but I think we're running out of time. Lastly, just want to know, from an astute diplomat to a politician now, how has this transition been?
Well, I'm still getting used to it. In a way, I would say, see, what happens as a diplomat is one of the qualities you develop is an ability to rapidly adjust to a new surrounding. You come to a country. Often it's a country where you don't even speak the language. But people in India expect that, you're supposed to know everything and do everything out there. So there is a sort of an inbuilt adjustment mechanism which has worked. But having said that, look, I would say, and it's a sort of strange observation for someone in their 60s to make, it's a great learning process. Somewhere a different world has opened up with different modes of working, where your relationship with society is very different, and which has its own own rules in a way, own ethos certainly. I would say the last 2-3 months I learned a lot, things which wouldn't have normally come across my radar at all. At one level, I would say there's a sort of a new enthusiasm that you have, because you're starting something new, and you have all the interest and sort of energy which comes out of it. At one level, you actually are sometimes sort of get up in the morning and say, okay, that's me, and there's a sort of a sense of responsibility, and I would say expectations that come with it, and you obviously want to try and live up to it.
So India couldn't have got a better external affairs minister, and a more deserving one at that. Thank you so much for talking to Connected to India. It was a pleasure.